What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another video. Before I begin, let me say thank you to all my Patreon supporters. A lot of YouTubers, as well as a lot of members of the different Star Wars Facebook groups, are all talking about the eye-popping prices recently on different Star Wars collectibles. And it got me thinking, are we in the middle of a price bubble for Star Wars stuff? And to me, I think the writing is on the wall that there are a lot of warning signs out there. We're going to take a look at all the different segments of the Star Wars collecting community and also take a look at what the risks are moving forward. But before I begin on all of those items, let's take a look very generally as to what an asset bubble is. Investopedia had a really great article about asset bubbles through history, and they named the top 5 biggest. I'll put a link in the description for this video to this article for those 4 of you that actually want to read this article. But Investopedia basically says an asset bubble occurs when the price of a financial asset or commodity rises to levels well above historical norms, above its actual value, or both. And now you're asking yourself, Action Figure Grader, have you ever gone through an asset bubble, and do you have any experience with them? And my definitive answer is yes. 2 of the 5 named in that Investopedia article I went through directly. The internet or .com bubble in the late 1990s was one I'd participated in directly. In my old life, I used to be a financial advisor for an investment bank, and we took companies public. We would often take companies public with less than $1 million in sales, and the next day after their public offering on the stock market, they would be worth billions. It was complete insanity and a complete price bubble. The housing bubble in 2008 is another example. I'm currently in real estate, and the writing was on the wall when my barista at Starbucks was buying investment properties. So now that you have a better idea of what an asset bubble is, let's take a closer look at the overall antiques and collectibles market, at least here in the US. IBIS World put out a research paper about online antiques and collectibles. And just in the US market, they estimate that market at $1.6 billion. And they're expecting growth in 2021 of 2.5%, which is a fairly small number when you think about it. But my point for bringing this up is that the prices for certain collectibles, namely Star Wars items, is growing well faster than the overall market. What is driving the massive price changes in Star Wars collectibles? We'll dig into that in a little bit more detail later on. Okay, now that you have a better idea of what an asset bubble is and we've got the boring stuff out of the way, let's take a look at some of the different lines of Star Wars collectibles and what they're doing price-wise, starting with vintage items. If there's any good news to the Star Wars collecting market right now, those of you with very deep pockets seem to have it better than you used to. The prices in the Hakes auction lot 231 that I covered in a recent video seem to come in a little bit less than expected. And speaking with high-end collectors that collect very rare, very expensive items, they all say that that market has slowed from where it was a year or 2 ago. But to me, these prices are insanely eye-popping. My counter-argument to those types of high-end collectors would be, wouldn't the high-end market be the first one to show cracks? It's a very limited number of buyers that can afford those types of items. And when we're at or near a price bubble, those items would be the first to get hit. And I will say this when it comes to the standard retail market, that I do agree that standard loose license figures, non-weird variants, non-foreign variants that are tough to find, like PBPs and Spanish pox, things like that, and standard mint on cards that are pretty plentiful, those prices are fairly flat right now. I have not seen a major jump in those really since the Force Awakens era, 2010-ish. Those prices have been steadily increasing or flattened or even in some cases dropped. But that being said, that middle to upper tier market, not the super high-end collecting market like we saw with Hakes auction items, but you know, these are 2 examples of items that have just gone up exponentially. I'm going to put an insert here right now. 2 of these card backs, these unused Polish card backs, just sold fairly recently in Deal or No Deal, and you can see the prices in that graphic that I'm putting up right now. And I bought these 2 card backs, ungraded obviously, about maybe, let's call it 18 months ago, so a year and a half ago. And since that time, those prices have just gone up like crazy in multiples. And that to me is a major concern, only because, for example, this second generation cardback was sold in the bootleg group, I'd say 3 weeks ago. And while it was significantly higher than what I paid for it 18 months ago, the difference between the price in that card back on the bootleg group versus in Deal or No Deal was double. And that was, less than 3 weeks difference in time period. When I see a jump like that, a massive jump in price, that concerns me when it happens that quickly. And that to me is one of the very first signs of a bubble. The most obvious examples, though, of a price bubble are with modern items like the vintage collection. Here is my VC100 Star Killer, which I paid $85 shipped for, and it was autographed by Sam Witwer, the actor who played Star Killer. And less than 2 months later, I'm seeing ungraded examples that are not autographed that are up 300% in price. What is driving these massive price increases, and is this an example of an asset bubble? Now, sometimes the price increases are driven by market events, and of course Ahsoka was announced by Disney as a spin-off TV show. But here's my Canadian Ahsoka that I paid $313 for about 5 months ago, and I remember lamenting that I was overpaying for it. Well, look at the prices now, 2 or 3 or 4 months later. They've doubled, or in some cases gone up by 4 times. That to me signifies that there are panic buyers out there who are worried about having to pay even more in the future. Or there are speculators who are buying these up with the thought that the prices will continue to increase. That's a perfect example of an environment where it is an asset bubble. And it's not just the action figures. Let's take a look at what Star Wars comics and trading cards are doing. The price jumps there are even more insane. Admiral Thrawn's name was only mentioned one time during Season 2 of The Mandalorian by Ahsoka. And just the rumors of the actor being selected has driven the price of his first appearance in the comics from about $900 to $950 all the way up to as high as $5,000. Does this price jump of 400% in less than 2 months make sense to you? Even the reprint of that comic that came out in the 2008 2-pack has gone from $125 to a month later selling as high as $400. And I'm guessing that speculators are snapping these up, taking the comic out of this packaging, having it graded, and then trying to resell it to make a quick buck. To me, this is yet another example of an asset bubble. The vintage trading card community for Star Wars is experiencing the same insanity. Look at this Wonder Bread Luke Skywalker in a PSA 10, gem mint condition. In December, they were selling for $300. Well, by February, they're up to $5,600 or $8,000. How is this possible? I'm not ruling out market manipulation where fake buyers are buying it on eBay and then the seller cancels it in order to get a data point. But this kind of price spike is universal across all vintage Star Wars cards. So market manipulation is not the only answer. An asset bubble is. You can run this search for pretty much any vintage Star Wars trading card right now. Does it make sense that Luke Skywalker has gone up 400 to 500% in less than a month? It's just concerning, and it's a perfect example of an asset bubble environment. There's too many speculators out there, or there are too many panic buyers that are overpaying for items and driving the prices well past their true value. Another really sneaky way to see if we're in a price bubble or not is to look at the ancillary services. And let's talk about an ancillary service that I know well, and that's grading. Let's see what is going on with the different graders for both action figures as well as other collectibles. Over at Action Figure Authority, they announced last week that they are completely stopping taking any more economy tier grading submissions, which is their cheapest. Everything else is 6+ weeks to 4+ months behind schedule. And it's not just AFA. Collector Archive Services is at least double their turnaround times versus usual. And my guess is that it's either because people have more disposable income from the stimulus checks that are going out, or it's speculators who are buying items, getting them graded, and then flipping them to make a profit. And while I personally do not grade comics or trading cards, the companies that do, which are CGC, CBCS, and PGX for comics, and PSA for trading cards, they are also experiencing an overload with new orders. Just anecdotally, I looked at message boards for both of these grading types, and the complaints from customers are far and wide, with long turnaround times and a massive backlog of items. Okay, John, we get it. Star Wars prices are insane right now. But what about other toy lines? Well, unfortunately, the asset bubble is affecting those as well. And I've got a couple of examples for you. The trend of toy companies re-releasing retro-style figures that mimic the 1980s toys is here to stay. And while the items are beautiful, it has the net effect of getting some of these adult collectors who grew up in the 1980s to start rebuying their toys at inflated prices. Whether it's these retro lines that have come out recently over the last year, or the asset bubbles that we're talking about, or just extra disposable income due to stimulus checks, the prices for vintage 1980s He-Man toys has gone through the roof. And even though Hasbro already released the 25th anniversary line in the early 2000s, we all knew it was just a matter of time before they came out with the Retro Collection G.I. Joes after the success of the Star Wars Retro Collection. Most of these are reusing the same molds from before. When I got rid of my graded mint on card G.I. Joes about 2 years ago to focus solely on Star Wars, I couldn't give the things away. And now, looking at the prices for some of the items that I owned, they're selling for double and sometimes triple what I was able to get for mine. And it's not just toy lines and comics, folks. The sports memorabilia market is completely out of control. And while I do not collect this type of stuff, I do know guys that do, and they all say the prices are just stratospheric. A Luka Doncic autographed rookie card just sold for $4.6 million 2 days ago. And that was for a 3-year-old card. 4 of the highest 5 sales in the sports memorabilia market have all happened in the last 6 months. So are prices going to keep on going up forever, or is there an end in sight? Let's take a look at a few of the factors that affect specifically the Star Wars collectibles market, and why I think we could see a pullback very soon. After the lukewarm reception of The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, prices seemed to stagnate and even come down a little bit, and a lot of people blamed it on Star Wars fatigue. Just too much Star Wars, too fast, and coming too close to each other in terms of the movies. Well, now that Disney has announced all of these different spin-offs after the success of The Mandalorian, I wonder if this is going to happen again in late 2021 or 2022. There's just so much new content coming out, and while I personally am excited about it, the mainstream audience may not be. What I'm trying to get at is, how could Disney possibly recreate the popularity of The Mandalorian across so many different shows? It just seems like an impossible task. I don't see how they can possibly get the pop culture crossover success of The Mandalorian with all of these other shows. And if the mainstream audience demand isn't there, and I'm not talking about just the hardcore fans, but all of the mainstream, like The Mandalorian got, how can prices possibly stay where they are right now? I feel like a price correction is almost impossible to avoid in 2021 or potentially in 2022. It just seems like the market is already pricing in massive success for these spin-off TV shows, especially when you look at like Ahsoka as a TVC figure or some of the comics that are out there. How can these price spikes already be in place, given that we have no idea how successful and how mainstream these shows will become? It just seems like they are due for an eventual pullback in price if some of these shows fall flat with mainstream audiences. The other big reason I see a massive pullback in price, either in 2021 or sometime in 2022, on Star Wars collectibles, but also on other collectibles that we've already talked about, is basically a return to normalcy, so to speak. As herd immunity kind of kicks in and vaccinations happen across not only our country, but around the world, more money is going to be spent on other stuff other than plastic dolls and comic books. Vacations and travel, dining out, gas, concerts and other live events. All of these are expenses that have been fairly minimal over the last year, and they will spike up pretty dramatically as the worries over getting sick decrease. So now that I've thoroughly terrified you about prices right now, I bet you're asking yourself, well, what about you, John? Are you going to be selling all your stuff? The point of this video is not to scare you. I'm not some crazy person on a downtown sidewalk holding an action figure instead of a Bible saying that the end of the world is coming. The end is near. As I've said many times on my channel in the past, I'm not in this for the money. I really enjoy the passion of collecting, and I don't look at it from a resale perspective. I like to grade stuff because that's the way I am, and I like preserving stuff and knowing it's going to stay in good shape. But all that being said, there are some necessary precautions, especially for new collectors out there who are competing against speculators and flippers for these items. On this slide, I put some key points to remember. The big thing that I want people to remember is treat everything like it's going to go to zero in terms of value. I don't count on any of my action figures being worth spit when I die. But at the end of the day, it's all play money for me. Everyone has their own budget. And for me, I have my own budget for items, but I don't treat these like some sort of retirement account. Number 2, don't panic buy. If you're patient, eventually you'll find what you're looking for at a fair price. And if it never comes back down, then move along and find something else that's cool. If you happen to be a flipper or a reseller that's watching this video, I don't grudge you or anything like that, but just keep in mind that the merry-go-round is going to end at some point, and you don't want to be the one left holding a lot of expensive inventory when the prices start falling. And believe me, at some point the prices will come down again eventually. Finally, pick and choose your spots to buy. I'm very, very selective now when I buy something, and I only get it if it's a good deal and if it's something that I really want to add to my collection. At the end of the day, collect what you like. It's important to spend your money on stuff that you really want. And for me, whether it's vintage or modern or bootlegs, I get what I like. I'm not worried about resale. And I certainly don't view action figures as an asset diversification strategy. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a like and subscribe. I look forward to being back soon, and thanks for watching.